I sold my house to pay for my husband's cancer treatment. When he recovered, he left me for a younger woman. My son and my business partners mocked me. I spent a cold night in a rainstorm when I saw a terrified little girl shivering from the cold. I used my last $10 to buy her food and a blanket. 3 days later, 17 black cars pulled up in front of the shelter. When a billionaire got out of the car and saw his daughter with me, "I am happy to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment from which city you are watching me so I can see how far my story has traveled." I never thought my 22-year marriage would end with the words, "I don't need you anymore." I was standing in the kitchen of the house I had just sold, watching Robert pack his things with a smile I hadn't seen in years, a smile that was not for me. "Patricia, this is for the best for both of us," he said to me without even looking me in the eye. He was 58, with grey hair that had become distinguished during his treatment, and now that he was cured, he looked 10 years younger, radiant, free from me. The irony hit me like a punch to the gut. Just 8 months earlier, this same man had cried in my arms when the doctor uttered those terrible words. Stage 3, pancreatic cancer. I remember how his hands shook when he held the biopsy results, how he looked at me with desperate eyes and said, "I don't want to die, Patty. I'll do anything to live." And I did anything to keep him alive. I sold our house in Westchester, the same one where we raised our son Daniel. I sold my car, my jewelry, even the antique furniture that had belonged to my mother. Every dollar went straight to Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, to the best oncologist that money could buy, to the experimental treatments that insurance refused to cover. $450,000 in total. Everything we had built together in more than 2 decades. "Do you remember when you told me you would do anything for me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He paused for a moment, a half-folded T-shirt in his hands. "That was before, Patty. I was sick, scared. People say things when they are dying." His tone was casual, as if we were talking about the weather. "But you weren't dying. I saved you." "No," he corrected me, finally turning to look at me. "Dr. Hendricks saved me. You just paid the bills." I just paid the bills, as if it were that simple, as if I hadn't spent entire nights holding his head while he threw up from chemotherapy, as if I hadn't slept in hospital chairs for weeks, as if I hadn't quit my nursing job to care for him full-time. "And now that you're well, you're just leaving," I said. It wasn't a question. I already knew the answer from the open suitcase on our old bed, from the way he avoided my gaze, from the glimmer in his eyes when he mentioned a friend who was helping him with the transition. "Her name is Jennifer," he said, and for the first time in months, he sounded honest. "She's 34. She is what I need now. Someone who makes me feel alive again. Jennifer." The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. Of course she was younger. Of course she had everything I had lost during years of worry, stress, and sacrifice. "And what about Daniel?" I asked, clinging to the last thread of hope. Our son was 31, a successful lawyer in Manhattan. He had always been closer to his father, but I thought maybe... Robert laughed, a bitter sound that chilled my blood. "Daniel agrees with me. In fact, it was his idea that I look for someone who would make me happy. He says I've wasted too many years being unhappy." My heart stopped. "You talked to Daniel about this. We had lunch yesterday. I explained the situation to him and he understood perfectly. He says you are, well, that you are toxic, that you have always been controlling and that it is time for me to live my life." Toxic, controlling, the words of my own son, repeated by the man I had given everything to. I held on to the edge of the countertop, feeling the floor move under my feet. He also says it's better if you don't have his number for a while, Robert continued, folding the t-shirt with precise movements. He needs space to process all this. My son was cutting me out of his life too. The baby I had carried for 9 months, who I had cared for when he was sick, who I had helped with school, with whom I had celebrated every achievement. Now he thought I was the problem. The sound of the doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Robert immediately cheered up, a genuine smile lighting up his face for the first time in years. "It must be Jennifer," he said, practically running toward the door. "She's coming to help me with the last boxes." I heard her before I saw her. A musical laugh, young, full of energy that I had lost a long time ago. When they appeared in the kitchen, the contrast was brutal. She was everything I was not. Naturally blonde, unwrinkled skin, a firm body clad in a dress that probably cost more than I earned in a month when I was working. "So you're Patricia," Jennifer said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Her smile was bright, rehearsed. "Robert has told me a lot about you, about everything you sacrificed during his illness. You are very generous." Generous. As if it had been charity to care for my own husband. "Yes, well," I managed to say, ignoring her extended hand. "That's what wives do." "Oh, but not all wives would have sold their house," she continued in that sweet voice that made me want to scream. "Robert says you don't have anywhere to go now. Do you have a plan?" The question was seemingly innocent, but the way she tilted her head, the small smile on her lips, she knew exactly what she was doing. "I'll manage," I replied with the little dignity I had left. "Of course you will." Robert intervened, closing the last box. "Patty always manages. She's very independent." Independent. Another pretty word for saying, she's not my problem anymore. I watched them load the boxes into a gleaming BMW, which definitely wasn't Robert's. While he put his belongings in the trunk, Jennifer approached me one last time. "You know," she said in a low voice, "you should really consider yourself lucky. Robert told me you were never truly compatible. He says he only stayed with you out of obligation, especially after Daniel was born." She moved closer, her expensive perfume filling my nostrils. At least now he can be honest about what he really wants. And with that, she left. My husband, of 22 years, got into his new girlfriend's car and drove away from the empty house that had once been our home, without even looking back. I was left standing in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear into the distance. I was 55. I had no home, no job, no family. The $1,200 in my checking account was all I had left from a lifetime of work and sacrifice. The sky began to darken, heavy clouds gathering on the horizon. A storm was approaching, and I had nowhere to take shelter. I spent the first night in the car. I had technically sold it to the dealership, but they gave me until Monday to turn it in. It was Friday night, and the abandoned shopping center parking lot had become my temporary refuge. I slept curled up in the back seat, waking up every few hours from the cold seeping through the windows. On Saturday, I tried to contact my sister Carol in Portland, but her husband Mark answered the phone. "Patricia, you know how Carol is," he said to me with that uncomfortable voice people use when they don't want to get involved. She and Robert were always very close. She feels confused about the whole situation. She thinks maybe she needs time to process things from Robert's perspective. "Robert's perspective?" I repeated, incredulous. "Mark. He abandoned me after I sold everything to save him." "Look, I don't want to get involved in marital troubles," he sighed. "But Robert called her yesterday and explained his side. He says you had become very demanding during his treatment, that you were suffocating him. Carol thinks maybe some time apart will do you both good." I hung up before he could continue. My own sister had chosen my ex-husband's side without even hearing mine. On Sunday, I turned in the car. The dealership employee, a young man about 25, counted the bills twice before giving me the $500 agreed upon. "Are you sure you don't want us to send you a cab?" he asked, seeing my single suitcase. "It looks like it's going to rain hard." "I'll be fine," I lied, loading my suitcase and walking toward the nearest bus stop. But I was not fine. The bus took me to the city centre, where cheap accommodation options were limited and dangerous. The cheapest motel I found cost $60 a night, money I couldn't afford to spend when I had no income. As I walked the streets looking for temporary shelter, the first drops began to fall. In a matter of minutes, it turned into a torrential downpour. The wind was whipping with such force that umbrellas were turning inside out, and people were running for shelter anywhere available. I found a small bus shelter that offered some protection, but the crosswind soaked me anyway. I huddled my suitcase against my chest, shivering as the cold water seeped through my cheap jacket. It was then that I heard it, a small cry, almost inaudible amid the roar of the storm. At first I thought it was the wind, but there was something different about the sound, something human. I left my suitcase under the shelter and ventured out into the rain, following the sound. I found her huddled behind a garbage container, a block away. She was a small girl, no more than 8 years old, soaked to the bone and shaking violently. Her clothes were nice, a blue dress that had probably been expensive before the mud and rain ruined it. Her shoes also looked designer, although they were now full of water. "Little one," I shouted over the wind. "Are you okay?" She looked up and my heart broke. She had big, dark eyes, full of terror, and lips blue from the cold. She was clearly lost and had been in the rain for hours. "No, I can't find my daddy," she stammered, her voice barely audible. I was at the park, and then there were a lot of people running, and I ran too, but in the wrong direction, and now I don't know where I am." I approached slowly, not wanting to scare her more. "What is your name, honey?" "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Chen. My daddy is very important. He is going to find me, but I am very cold and very hungry." Sophie Chen. The last name sounded familiar, but at that moment, the only thing that mattered was that this child needed urgent help. Her body temperature was dropping dangerously, and if I didn't warm her up soon, she could go into hypothermia. "It's okay, Sophie. My name is Patricia, and I'm going to take care of you until your daddy finds you." "Okay," she nodded weakly. I picked her up in my arms, surprised by how light she was, and ran back to the shelter where I had left my suitcase. I took out my only dry jacket and wrapped her in it. But it wasn't enough. The storm was intensifying, and there was no sign of it stopping soon. We needed real shelter, hot food, and blankets. I looked at my wallet. $500 minus the $60 I had spent on food during the day. I had $440 left to survive until I could find work, which could take weeks. But looking at Sophie shivering in my arms, there was no decision to make. "Come on, little one," I told her, carrying her along with my suitcase. "Let's find a warm place." The only place open was a gas station 6 blocks away. The employee, an older man with a grey beard, looked at us with compassion when we entered soaked and trembling. "My goodness," he muttered. "Are you two all right?" "The little girl is lost," I explained quickly. "Do you have any blankets? Any hot food?" He nodded, directing us toward the back of the store, where there was a small break area for employees. "I have some blankets in my car, and I can heat up soup in the microwave." On the shelf, I saw emergency blankets for $10 each, instant soup for $3, and hot chocolate for $2. I grabbed 2 blankets, 2 soups, and 2 hot chocolates. $28 that hurt to spend, but were necessary. While Sophie warmed up with the soup, I tried to get more information about her family. Do you remember your daddy's phone number, Sophie? She shook her head. It's in my phone, but I lost it when I was running. But he's going to come for me. He always comes for me. And your mummy? Her eyes filled with tears. Mummy went to heaven last year. It's just Daddy and me now. My heart tightened. This child had lost her mother, and now she was lost in a storm, separated from her only parent. I hugged her tighter, feeling her small arms wrap around my neck. Don't worry, honey. We are going to find your daddy. I promise. The gas station employee, who introduced himself as Frank, let us stay in the small back room until the storm passed. He had an old radio where we tried to listen for news about lost children, but there were only weather reports and storm warnings. Sophie fell asleep curled up against me in the small reclining chair, wrapped in both blankets. I watched her sleep, noticing her long eyelashes and the way her small hand clung to my jacket, even in her dreams. For the next few hours, I stayed awake listening to the rain hit the metal roof. Frank came by every hour to check that we were okay, bringing us more hot chocolate and cookies from the vending machine. He refused to let me pay him. I have a granddaughter that age, he said in a low voice, looking at Sophie sleeping. I can't imagine how desperate her father must be. I couldn't imagine it either, but I could imagine my own desperation if it were my grandson lost in a storm, if I ever had the chance to meet Daniel's children. Close to 3 o'clock in the morning, Sophie woke up crying. Patricia, she whispered in the dark, are you still here? Yes, honey, I'm here, I replied, stroking her damp hair. I'm scared that my daddy thinks I did something wrong. I wasn't supposed to get away from the bodyguard. Bodyguard? That was an important clue. Her family had money, enough to hire personal security. That explained the expensive clothes and why her name sounded familiar. You didn't do anything wrong, Sophie. Sometimes these things just happen. Your daddy is going to be so happy to see you safe. She snuggled closer. Do you have kids? The question hurt more than I expected. Yes, I have a son. His name is Daniel. Where is he? He is very busy with his work, I said, not wanting to burden an 8-year-old with my family problems. My daddy is very busy too, Sophie murmured, but he always finds time for me. He says I'm the most important thing in his life since Mummy left. Her words cut through me like a dagger. This child had what I had lost, a father who put her first, who valued her above everything else. When Sunday dawned, the storm had finally passed. Frank brought us coffee and donuts from the counter, again refusing to accept payment. What are you going to do now? We're going to the police station. They must report missing children, and I'm sure her father already has. But when we arrived at the nearest police station, it was closed for renovations. A sign directed us to the central precinct 12 blocks away. Can we take a taxi? Sophie asked, seeing the distance. I looked at my wallet. I had $412 left after the food and blankets. A taxi would cost at least $10, money I needed to conserve. But looking at Sophie, still weak after the terrible night, I couldn't make her walk 12 blocks. Of course, honey, I told her, raising my hand to hail a cab. As the taxi approached, Sophie took my hand. Patricia, she said seriously, when my daddy finds me, I'm going to make sure he knows how good you were to me. He is going to want to thank you. I smiled, squeezing her little hand. I just want you to be safe with your family. I had no idea that those words would change my life forever. The Central Police Precinct was an imposing red brick building that intimidated me from the moment we got out of the taxi. Sophie walked beside me, her small hand clutching mine as we approached the main entrance. I had spent the whole morning reassuring her, telling her that everything would be fine, but now I myself felt butterflies in my stomach. The desk officer, a stocky man with a grey moustache, looked up when we approached the counter. "How can I help you?" he asked, but his expression immediately changed when he saw Sophie. His eyes widened, and he quickly picked up the phone. "Sergeant Martinez, we have her." "Yes, sir. The Chen girl is here." He turned to us with an expression that mixed relief and urgency. "Sophie Chen. Right, little one." Sophie nodded shyly, hiding behind my leg. "Her father has been looking for her all night," the officer continued. "Half the city has been looking for her. Where did you find her, ma'am?" Before I could answer, the station doors swung open and 3 men in dark suits entered, speaking rapidly into portable radios. One of them immediately approached the officer. "Is that her?" he asked in a tense voice. "Yes, it's Sophie Chen," the officer confirmed. "This lady brought her in." The man in the suit looked at me intensely, evaluating me from head to toe. "Your name, ma'am?" "Patricia Williams," I replied, feeling as if I were being interrogated. "I found Sophie last night during the storm. She was lost and scared, so I took care of her until I could bring her here." The man spoke quickly into his radio. "Confirming the miner's location. She is safe. The lady who found her is named Patricia Williams." In a matter of minutes, the station filled with activity. More men in suits arrived, some with earpieces, others checking the area as if we were a security risk. Sophie clung tighter to my hand. "What is happening?" she whispered. "Mr. Chen is on his way," one of the men explained. "He should arrive any minute, Mr. Chen." The name kept resonating in my mind as something I should recognize, but I couldn't place it exactly. It was then that we heard the roar of multiple engines approaching. Through the glass windows of the station, I saw something that took my breath away. 17 identical black cars forming a perfect motorcade in front of the building. Each one looked like a limo, gleaming under the morning sun. "My God," I murmured. The police officers had also moved closer to the windows, clearly impressed by the display. I had never seen so much luxury concentrated in one place. From the central car, a security team got out first, men and women dressed in black who immediately formed a perimeter. Then, from the back of the same vehicle, a man got out whom I recognized instantly. William Chen, the billionaire William Chen. My heart stopped. Now I understood why the name sounded familiar, why Sophie had bodyguards, why this whole operation seemed military. William Chen was one of the richest people in the country, owner of Chen Industries, an empire that included technology, real estate, and entertainment. His fortune was estimated at more than $12 billion, and I had been taking care of his daughter all night without even knowing it. Sophie let go of my hand and ran toward the door. "Daddy! Daddy!" William Chen entered the station like a controlled hurricane. He was taller than he appeared in magazine photos, probably 6 feet 1 inch, with perfectly groomed black hair, and a suit that probably cost more than my former annual salary. But the moment he saw Sophie, all that composure crumbled. "Sophie!" he cried, falling to his knees to receive her in his arms. "My little one, my little one. I thought I had lost you forever." I watched them hug, and for a moment he was not the most powerful man in the country. He was simply a father relieved to have his lost daughter back. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying, and his hands were shaking as he checked Sophie to make sure she was unharmed. "I'm fine, Daddy," Sophie told him, wiping a tear from his cheek. "Patricia took care of me. She kept me warm and gave me food, and she stayed with me all night, even though she was cold too." William Chen looked up at me for the first time, and when our eyes met, something strange happened. His expression changed from relief to confusion, then to something that looked like recognition. "Patricia Williams?" he asked slowly, standing up without letting go of Sophie. "Yes," I replied, confused by his reaction. He studied me intensely for several long seconds, as if he were trying to place a distant memory. Then, to my absolute astonishment, his eyes filled with tears. "Patricia Williams, from Mercy General Hospital?" he asked in a broken voice. My heart skipped a beat. Mercy General had been my first job as a nurse more than 30 years ago. I had worked there for 5 years before transferring to a hospital closer to home when Daniel was born. "Yes," I whispered. "I worked there a long, long time ago." William Chen closed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if he had just solved the most important mystery of his life. "Pediatric Intensive Care Unit," he said, opening his eyes to look directly at me. 1992 March, a 7-year-old boy with severe pneumonia. His parents didn't speak English. They were terrified, and everyone else was too busy to pay real attention. The world stopped around me. Suddenly, the memory came like an avalanche. A small boy, thin and pale, struggling to breathe in a hospital bed. His parents, recent immigrants who barely spoke English, lost in the medical system. I remembered staying extra shifts, learning basic phrases in Mandarin to be able to communicate with them, holding the boy's hand during the most painful procedures. "William," I whispered, barely believing what I was seeing. You were that boy." He nodded, tears now running freely down his face. "You saved my life, Mrs. Williams. Not medically, the doctors did that. But you saved my soul. When everyone else saw me as just another case, you saw me as a person. You talked to me, read me stories, translated everything for my parents so they wouldn't be afraid." The memories kept coming in waves. I remembered that little boy, so smart and curious, despite being so sick. I had taught him English words during his recovery. I had convinced other children in the ward to include him in their games. I had done everything possible to make his stay in the hospital less traumatic. "When I recovered," William continued, "my father asked the administration about you. He wanted to thank you properly, maybe offer you something for your kindness. But you had already transferred to another hospital. For years I tried to find you. Sophie was watching us with wide eyes, clearly not fully understanding what was happening, but intuiting that it was something important." "You already knew each other?" she asked. "Your daddy and I met a long, long time ago," I explained, still processing this incredible coincidence. "When he was a little boy, like you." William wiped his eyes and straightened up, although he kept a protective hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Mrs. Williams," he said in a formal but warm voice, "I cannot adequately express my gratitude for caring for Sophie. But more than that, the universe clearly wanted us to meet again. After all these years of searching for you, you saved my daughter the same way you saved me." One of his assistants approached discreetly. "Mr. Chen, the media has started to arrive. We should consider moving to a more private location." William nodded, then turned to me. "Mrs. Williams, would you accompany us? There is a lot I would like to talk to you about." And Sophie has clearly developed a very strong bond. Sophie let go of her father and ran toward me, hugging my waist. "Patricia, you have to come with us. Daddy, she has nowhere to go. She told me last night." My face flushed with shame, but William frowned with genuine concern. "Is that true?" he asked gently. I didn't want to admit my desperate situation, especially not to someone so successful, but the honest look in his eyes made me be honest too. "I've had some recent challenges," I admitted. William didn't press for more details, at least not there in public. Instead, he extended his hand toward me. Then it's decided, he said. You will be our guest until we can talk properly about all this. It's the least I can do for the woman who saved the two most important people in my life. As we left the police precinct toward the motorcade of black cars, with Sophie holding my hand and William walking on her other side, I realized that my life had just taken a turn I never could have imagined. The car we got into was more luxurious than anything I had ever seen. Creamy leather seats, built-in screens, and a full bar. But what impressed me most was seeing William in his natural element, talking on the phone to cancel meetings and completely rearrange his day to be with Sophie. "Where are we going?" I asked as the convoy set off. "Home," William replied, smiling as Sophie snuggled between the two of us. "We have a lot to talk about and 30 years of gratitude to catch up on." William Chen's mansion was exactly what you would expect from one of the richest men in the world, but somehow managed to be imposing without being ostentatious. It stretched across acres of perfectly manicured lawns, with architecture that blended modern elegance with classic touches. As the convoy approached the main entrance, Sophie pressed her face against the window. "We're home," she exclaimed with genuine relief. "Patricia, wait until you see my room. Daddy says I can decorate it however I want." When we got out of the car, a team of household staff was already waiting. An older woman, clearly the housekeeper, immediately approached Sophie with tears in her eyes. "Miss Sophie," she said with a British accent, "you had us all very worried." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison," Sophie replied, hugging the woman. "But look, this is Patricia. She took care of me during the storm. She's my hero." William guided me inside while Sophie received hugs from several staff members who clearly adored her. The house inside was even more impressive. High ceilings, art that was probably worth millions, and a sense of space and light that made me feel like I was in a museum. "Please sit down," William said, leading me to a living room that was larger than my entire old apartment. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Water?" "Coffee would be fine," I replied, feeling completely out of place amid so much luxury. William pressed a button on a sleek console, and in less than a minute, a housekeeper appeared with a tray of coffee that smelled better than anything I had ever tasted in my life. "Sophie," William said when she ran into the room, "why don't you go with Mrs. Morrison to take a hot bath and put on clean clothes? Patricia and I need to talk about grown-up things." "Is Patricia going to stay for dinner?" Sophie asked hopefully. "If she wants to," William replied, looking at me with a smile. "In fact, I hope she stays much longer than that." After Sophie left, William sat across from me, and for the first time since I had recognized him, I could really see him. He was 46 now, but his eyes still held that same intense curiosity I remembered from the boy in the hospital. There was also sadness there, lines of stress that spoke of immense loss and responsibility. "Mrs. Williams," he began, "before we talk about anything else, I need you to know something. Since the day I left the hospital, I have been looking for you, not just out of gratitude, although I certainly have that, but because you fundamentally changed who I am as a person." I took a sip of my coffee, which was extraordinary. "William, I was just doing my job." "No," he said firmly, leaning forward. "That was not just your job. I remember every detail of those 3 weeks in the hospital. I remember how all the other nurses and doctors talked about me as if I wasn't there. I remember how my parents felt invisible, ignored. But you learned our names. You learned Mandarin words so you could speak to my parents directly." The memories were coming back more clearly now. The Chen family had arrived in the United States only 2 years earlier. The father worked in a dry cleaner's, the mother cleaned offices at night. When William got sick, they were terrified not only for his health, but for the medical costs that could destroy everything they had worked for. Your father was so worried about the bills, I remembered out loud. I remember him trying to work from the hospital, using the public phone in the hallway to communicate with his boss. William nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. And you spoke with hospital social services. You found assistance programs we qualified for. You stayed after your shift to fill out the forms with my parents because they didn't understand the English well enough. I had forgotten those details, but now they came back in a wave. I had stayed late many nights that week, helping the Chen family navigate not only the medical system, but also the financial assistance system that would prevent them from going bankrupt. I also remember, William continued, that when other children in the ward avoided me because I didn't speak English perfectly, you organized games where language didn't matter. You helped me make friends. For the first time since we arrived in this country, I felt like I belonged somewhere. You were a very brave boy, I told him, and very smart. I remember you learning new English words every day. Because you taught them to me, he replied. And when I was discharged, you gave my father your personal phone number. You told him that if I ever needed help with school or had questions about medicine as a career, he could call you. I remembered that too. I had seen something special in William, a determination and curiosity that I knew would take him far if he had the right opportunities. My father kept that paper in his wallet for years, William continued. But when he finally tried to call, the number had been disconnected. You had changed jobs and moved. I transferred to Riverside General, I confirmed. It was closer to home after my son was born. Daniel, William said, and I was surprised that he remembered the name I had briefly mentioned the night before. Yes, Daniel, I replied, feeling the familiar pang of pain, thinking about my son who no longer spoke to me. William noticed my change of expression, but didn't press. Instead, he continued with his story. After leaving the hospital, I became obsessed with proving that I was worthy of the kindness you had shown us. I studied constantly. I learned English perfectly. I got scholarships to the best schools. I built my company not just for success, but because I wanted to be the kind of person who could help others the way you helped us. I was speechless. The idea that something I had done during my routine work as a nurse had had such an impact on someone's life was overwhelming. Every year, William continued, on the anniversary of my hospital discharge, I donate $1 million to family support programs in hospitals. It's my way of honoring what you did for us, but I always felt it was inadequate because I could never thank you personally. $1 million per year for more than 30 years. I realized that my small act of kindness had indirectly resulted in more than $30 million in aid for families in crisis. And now, William said, his voice full of emotion, not only do I find you again, but I discover that you have saved Sophie, the same way you saved me. Not medically, but emotionally, spiritually. Sophie appeared in the doorway at that moment, dressed in clean, dry clothes, her hair shining after her bath. She ran over and climbed onto the sofa between us. "What are you talking about?" she asked curiously. "I was telling Patricia about when I was a little boy and she helped me in the hospital," William explained. Sophie looked at me with renewed astonishment. "You helped Daddy when he was little just like you helped me?" "Yes," I replied, smiling at her expression of wonder. "It's like you're our special guardian angel," Sophie said seriously. "First you saved Daddy, and now you saved me. That's no coincidence." William and I exchanged glances. The innocent wisdom of his daughter had captured exactly how surreal the whole situation was. "Sophie is right," William said softly. "This is not a coincidence. It is destiny. And now that we have finally found you again, we are not going to let you disappear again." He turned to me with a serious expression. "Patricia, Sophie mentioned last night that you have nowhere to go. I don't know what circumstances led you to that situation, and you don't need to tell me if you don't want to. But what I do know is this. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. And more importantly, Sophie has clearly formed a strong connection with you. It's true, Sophie interrupted. Patricia is the kindest person I have met since Mummy died. She made me feel safe when I was very scared. William took his daughter's hand. Then he looked directly at me. I would like to offer you a home here, with us. Not as an employee, but as family. Sophie needs a mother figure in her life, and you clearly have a natural gift for caring for others. My heart skipped several beats. William, that is incredibly generous, but I cannot accept charity. It is not charity, he said firmly. It is justice. It is the universe finally balancing things. Besides, he added with a smile, Sophie has informed me that you make the best hot chocolate she has ever tasted. And as a single dad, I definitely need help in the culinary department. Sophie laughed, clapping her hands. Oh, yes. And Patricia knows lullabies and makes funny voices when she tells stories. I looked at both of them, this billionaire father and his precious daughter, offering me something I had lost forever, a family that truly wanted me, but a part of me still couldn't believe it was real. What if my ex-husband and son try to cause you problems? I asked. They won't want people like you to know the kind of person I really am. William frowned. The kind of person you are? Patricia, you are the kind of person who sacrifices for others. You are the kind of person who uses her last $10 to help a stranger. You are the kind of person who stays up all night keeping a scared little girl warm. I don't care what anyone else says about you. I know who you are. Sophie snuggled against my arm. Are you going to stay, Patricia? Please say yes. I don't want you to leave. I looked around this beautiful house, at this successful man who remembered me with such gratitude after 30 years, at this precious child who had lost her mother and who was now looking at me with pure hope in her eyes. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, my story hadn't ended with abandonment and betrayal. Maybe it was just beginning. 3 months after that stormy night that changed my life, I woke up in a room that still felt like a dream. The suite that William had given me in his mansion was larger than the entire apartment where I had lived with Robert. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the perfectly manicured gardens, and every morning I woke up to the sound of Sophie laughing as she played in the yard. The transition had been more natural than I ever imagined. William kept his word about treating me like family, not like an employee. I had my own wing of the house, my own car, a credit card with no limit that I barely touched because I wasn't used to spending money on myself. But more than the luxury, what had truly transformed me was feeling valued again. Sophie and I had developed a beautiful routine. Every morning we had breakfast together before she went to her private school. In the afternoons, I helped her with her homework. I read her stories, and we had started cooking together. She called me Aunt Patricia now, and every time she did, my heart filled with a warmth I had forgotten existed. William had been equally wonderful. He made sure I had everything I needed, but he never made me feel like a burden. In fact, he constantly insisted on the opposite. Patricia, he had told me the week before as the three of us ate dinner together, Sophie has completely changed since you arrived. She's happier, more confident, and I finally feel like I have the support I need to be the father she deserves. It was true. Since the death of his wife, Lisa, 2 years earlier, William had been struggling to balance the demands of his business empire with raising Sophie. Now, with my help, he could work knowing that his daughter was in loving hands. This particular morning was special. William had arranged for Sophie and me to go shopping to find a dress for the charitable gala ball his foundation organized every year. It was a huge event, attended by the most important people in the city, and William insisted that we both be his guests of honor. "Are you nervous about the gala?" Sophie asked as we walked through the most exclusive boutique in the city. The owner, an elegant woman named Madame Lorraine, had given us full personal attention. "A little," I admitted. "I haven't been to such a fancy event well, never really." "You're going to look beautiful," Sophie said with 8-year-old confidence. "Daddy says you have a natural beauty that doesn't need many embellishments." Madame Lorraine nodded approvingly as she adjusted a navy blue dress on me that cost more than the car I had sold months earlier. "The girl is right. You have a classic elegance, madame. This color enhances your eyes perfectly." As I looked at myself in the full-length mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. The months of good food, adequate rest, and more importantly, feeling loved and valued had erased years of stress from my face. My hair, now professionally cut and styled, shone again. The dress made me look sophisticated, confident. "Do you like it?" Sophie asked, clapping her hands. "I love it," I replied honestly. For the first time in years, I looked like someone who deserved to be in beautiful places. After shopping, we returned home to find William in his office, but he was not alone. I could hear raised voices from the hallway, and as we got closer, I immediately recognized one of them. My stomach sank. "Robert!" "Sophie, go to your room, please," I said quickly. "The adults need to talk." She frowned, but obeyed. I approached the office, where I could hear the conversation clearly. "Look, Mr. Chen," Robert was saying with that charming voice he used when he wanted something. "I understand Patricia told you her version of our separation, but there are two sides to every story. My ex-wife can be very manipulative when she wants something." "Manipulative?" William replied, and I could hear the ice in his voice. "Are you referring to when she sold your house to pay for your cancer treatment?" "Well, yes, but you don't understand. She became obsessive, controlling. She wouldn't let me make my own decisions about my treatment. And afterward, when I recovered, she became possessive, jealous of my recovery." I clenched my fists, feeling the familiar mix of rage and disbelief at Robert's lies. "And now," Robert continued, "I discover that she is living here, probably filling your head with stories about how terrible I was. The truth is that Patricia has always had problems maintaining healthy relationships. Ask our son, Daniel." It was then that I heard the second voice that chilled my blood. "It's true," Daniel said, "my own son. My mother has a pattern of toxic behavior. She always plays the victim, but in reality she is very manipulative and demanding. We came to warn you before she causes problems in your family too." Warn him. My ex-husband and my son had come to warn William about me. After months of silence, now that they knew about my new life, they had appeared to try to destroy it. I took a deep breath and walked into the office. "Hello, Robert. Daniel." They both turned toward me, and I could see the shock on their faces. Daniel especially seemed unable to believe what he was seeing. During our last meeting, I had been a broken woman, desperate. Now, elegantly dressed, radiant with health and confidence, I was a completely different person. "Patricia," Robert said, regaining his composure, "you look good." "I look good because I am good," I replied calmly, "for the first time in years." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mum, we need to talk. Privately." "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of William," I replied. "I don't have secrets with my family." "Your family?" Robert repeated scornfully. "Patricia, don't be ridiculous. These people are not your family. I am your ex-husband. He is your son. We are your real family." William stood up from his desk, and although he was not a physically intimidating man, there was something about his presence that filled the room. "Gentlemen," he said in a controlled voice, "I think there is a confusion here. Patricia is absolutely part of my family. She has been a blessing to my daughter and to me. So whatever you came to say, it better be very important to justify bursting into my home and speaking like that about someone I deeply respect." Robert tried to regain control of the conversation. "Mr. Chen, Patricia probably didn't tell you that I left my girlfriend Jennifer to try to reconcile with her. We've been working on our relationship." I laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that surprised everyone. "Working on our relationship? Robert, we haven't spoken in 4 months. And you didn't leave Jennifer. Jennifer left you when she found out you were spending her money on gambling." Robert's face turned red. "That's not... How do you know that?" "Because Jennifer called me last week," I replied. "She wanted to apologize for the horrible things she said to me the day you kicked me out of the house. Apparently, discovering that the man she thought was successful and stable is actually a compulsive gambler gave her a new perspective on who the real victim in our story was." Daniel intervened desperately. "Mum, this is exactly what we are talking about. You always have to air dirty laundry. You always have to make others look bad so you look good." I turned to my son, studying his face. He was 31. He was successful, handsome. He was also exactly like his father in the ways that mattered most. "Daniel," I said softly, "do you know how much money I spent on your education?" "What does that have to do with—" $120,000, I continued. "Private school, university, law school. I worked double shifts for years to make sure you never had student debt." "Nobody asked you to do that," he murmured. "You're right. I did it because I loved you, because I wanted to give you the best opportunities. The same reason I sold our house to save your father's life." Daniel looked away, uncomfortable. "But here's the difference," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Sophie thanks me when I make her breakfast. William thanks me when I help him with something small, like organizing his calendar. In 3 months, I have received more gratitude and true love from this family than in 30 years with you two." "That's because they want something from you," Robert said desperately. "Rich people always want something." William approached, and when he spoke, his voice was lethal in its calm. "Mr. Williams, let me explain something about true wealth. True wealth is not about money. It is about having people in your life who love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. Patricia gave me that when I was a dying child in the hospital, when I had nothing to offer in return. And she is giving it to me again now with Sophie. You two, on the other hand, seem only to value Patricia when she can benefit you financially." Robert and Daniel exchanged glances, and I could see they were losing ground quickly. "Furthermore," William added, "I took the liberty of doing a little research before this meeting. Robert, would you like to explain why you owe $48,000 in gambling debts? Or Daniel, why your law firm is being investigated for client fund embezzlement?" The color drained from both their faces. Daniel opened his mouth to protest, but William cut him off. "Gentlemen, I suggest you leave now, and if you bother Patricia again in any way, I will make sure those investigations receive all the attention they deserve." I watched them as they left. These two men who had defined my life for so long, now small and defeated. Daniel turned once at the door. "Mum," he said, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy he once had been. "If you ever need anything—" "I don't need anything from you," I replied softly. "But Daniel, if you ever need a real mother, you know where to find me." After they left, William put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" I thought about the question for a moment. Then I smiled. You know what? Yes, I am perfectly fine. And for the first time in my life, it was completely true. 1 year after that stormy night that changed my destiny, I found myself standing in the Chen mansion garden, watching Sophie practice her dance routine for the school recital. The afternoon sun created a golden halo around her small figure as she twirled and jumped with the natural grace of a born dancer. "Aunt Patricia!" she shouted, running toward me after completing her routine. "Did you see how I did the perfect grand jeté? Miss Catherine says I'm one of her best students." "I saw it, sweetheart," I replied, hugging her tight. "You were spectacular. Your mummy would be very proud." Sophie had started talking more about her deceased mother in recent months, and I had learned to honor that memory instead of feeling threatened by it. Lisa Chen had been, by all accounts, an extraordinary woman, and I would never try to replace her. Instead, I had found my own unique place in Sophie's heart. "You know what?" Sophie said, taking my hand as we walked toward the house. "I think Mommy sent you to us. The night before the storm, I dreamed about her. She told me that someone very special was coming soon to take care of Daddy and me." My heart tightened with emotion. Sophie was 9 years old now, but sometimes she displayed a wisdom that left me breathless. We entered the house to find William in the kitchen, something that still surprised me after all this time. One of the most powerful men in the world, but he insisted on preparing family dinner on Sundays. Today he was struggling with what looked like carbonara pasta. "Do you need help?" I offered, laughing at the concentrated expression on his face. "Definitely, Vicar," he admitted. "I don't understand how something so simple can be so complicated." We worked together in the kitchen, a routine we had perfected over the months. Sophie set the table while William and I finished dinner. These simple domestic moments had become the most precious thing in my new life. During dinner, William announced news he had been holding back. "I've made an important decision about the foundation," he said, looking directly at me. "I want Patricia to become the executive director of the hospital family support program." I nearly choked on my wine. "William, I can't accept that. I don't have experience managing a foundation." "You have 35 years of experience, understanding exactly what families in medical crisis need," he replied. "And more importantly, you have the heart to do it well. The salary will be $200,000 a year, plus benefits and an annual budget of $5 million for programs." $200,000. More money than I had ever earned, to do work that really mattered. "In addition," he added with a smile, "the job requires you to live close to the central office, which coincidentally is 10 minutes from here. So you would have to stay in the guest house permanently." Sophie clapped with excitement. "That means you're never leaving." I looked at both of them, this family that had saved me in every sense of the word, and felt tears of gratitude filling my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, "I accept." After dinner, while Sophie worked on her homework and William reviewed some documents, I sat in my favorite living room reading. It was a cozy space with windows overlooking the garden, full of books and a fireplace that made everything feel like home. My phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Then I answered. "Patricia?" came a familiar but tense voice. "It's Carol," my sister. We hadn't spoken since she chose Robert's side in our divorce. "Hello, Carol," I replied carefully. "Patricia, I need to apologize." Her voice broke. "Mark left me last week. He took half of our savings and moved in with his secretary. And when I tried to call Robert to talk about what happened with you, he hung up on me. He said he didn't want to hear about dramatic women." Silence. Then she continued. "I realized that all these months I've been on the wrong side. You were the only one who truly understood what it was like to be betrayed by someone you trusted completely, and I abandoned you when you needed me most. Carol, I began. No, she interrupted me. Let me finish. I saw the photos in the magazine about the charity event where you appear with the Chens. You looked radiant, happy, and I realized that you found a real family after your blood family failed you so terribly. The photos. The charity gala had been covered by several social magazines, and indeed I had appeared in several photos with William and Sophie. In one of them, the three of us were laughing during William's speech, and anyone who saw it could see that we were a family, regardless of the lack of blood ties. I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me, Carol continued. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong, terribly, and that I'm glad you found people who value you as you deserve. After hanging up, I sat reflecting on the conversation. A year earlier, a call like that would have destroyed me emotionally. Now it simply confirmed that I had made the right decisions. A week later, something even more surprising happened. I was in my new office at the foundation, reviewing proposals for new hospital programs, when my assistant announced that I had a visitor. Daniel entered my office, but it was a Daniel I barely recognized. He looked older, thinner, and there was something defeated in his eyes. "Mum," he said, stopping near the door as if he wasn't sure he was welcome. "Daniel, what can I do for you?" He looked around my elegant office, noticing the title on the door, the photos of Sophie and William on my desk. I came to apologize," he said finally, "and to tell you that I lost my job. The investigation Mr. Chen mentioned found some irregularities. Nothing criminal, but enough to get me fired." He sat down uninvited, something the arrogant Daniel of before would never have hesitated to do. "I also came to tell you that you were right about Dad. Jennifer wasn't the only one. There have been other women, and they all end the same way when they find out about his gambling debts. He's living in a one-bedroom apartment now, begging for money from anyone who will listen." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said honestly. "Really?" he asked, surprised. "After everything we did to you?" I considered the question carefully. "Daniel, I was angry for a long time, hurt, but the life I have now is better than anything I could have imagined. In a way, you did me a favor by forcing me to find my own path." Daniel nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "Mum, is there any way that we could try again? I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but maybe we could—" "Daniel," I told him gently, "you will always be my son. I will always love you. But trust is something that is earned, and it will take time. A lot of time." "Time?" he asked hopefully. "If you really want to be part of my life, you're going to have to show that you've changed, not with words, but with actions, for years, not months." He nodded vigorously. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Then start by seeking real help, therapy, work on yourself. And when you're ready to be honest about the mistakes you've made, with no excuses, no blaming others, then we can talk about rebuilding a relationship." After he left, I called William to tell him about the visit. "How do you feel about it?" he asked me. "At peace," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. "I don't feel the need for revenge that I once had. I don't feel the desperation to be accepted that I used to feel. If Daniel truly changes, he will be welcome in my life. But if he doesn't, I'll be fine too." That night, the three of us had dinner together as always. Sophie told us about her day at school. William shared a funny story from his work, and I sat there feeling overwhelming gratitude for this unexpected life. Later, after Sophie went to bed, William and I sat on the terrace watching the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that storm hadn't come? He asked me. I thought about the question. Sometimes. But then I realized that everything had to happen exactly as it did to bring me here. My marriage had to end. My relationship with Daniel had to break. I had to be at my lowest point to fully appreciate this. I think you're right, William said softly. And I think Lisa would be happy to know that Sophie has someone who loves her as much as you do. I smiled, thinking about the woman I never met, but whom I honored every day by loving her daughter. Do you know what the most amazing thing is? I told him. For years, I thought my value was in what I could do for others. How much money could I give? How much could I sacrifice? How much pain could I absorb without complaining? But here, you value me simply for being me. Sophie loves me because I read her stories and make heart-shaped pancakes. You respect me because you see my character, not my usefulness. That's because that's what truly matters, William replied. True love doesn't demand sacrifice. True love gives freely and receives with gratitude. As we sat in the comfortable silence of the night, I reflected on the incredible journey this last year had been. I had started as a broken woman, betrayed by the people I loved most, sleeping in the rain without a cent. Now I had a meaningful career, a loving family, and more importantly, an inner peace I had never experienced before. William's phone rang, and he checked the message quickly. It's the director of the children's hospital, he told me. He wants to schedule a meeting with you to discuss expanding the family support program to other hospitals in the state. I smiled. My new life wasn't just about finding personal happiness. It was about using my experience to help other families who were going through the crises I had lived through. Schedule the meeting, I told him. There is a lot of work to do. As we entered the house, I passed Sophie's room and saw her sleeping peacefully, hugging the teddy bear I had bought her with my last $10 that rainy night a year ago. It had become her most cherished possession, not for its value, but for what it represented, the moment a stranger decided to care for her when she needed it most. In my own room, I looked at the photos on my dresser. There were no longer photos of Robert or Daniel. In their place, there were dozens of photos of Sophie and William, of everyday moments that had become extraordinary simply because they were filled with real love. Before going to sleep, as I had done every night for the last 12 months, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not just for the beautiful house, or the meaningful job, or even the financial security I had never had before. I was thankful for having learned, finally, the difference between being needed and being loved. I was thankful for having found my true family, not in blood ties, but in ties of choice and mutual love. And I was thankful for that terrible storm that had washed away my previous life and prepared me for the miracle that awaited me on the other side. Sometimes, I thought as I fell asleep, losing everything is the only way to discover what is truly worth having.